from Canada up north, and Mr. Maroun is he's a Lebanese Canadian, and hold on, let me need to mute this volume. Sorry, that's my fault. But I was just hearing myself talk after telling you to turn the echo down. But anyways, let me introduce Fred. Tell us, how did it come to be that you left Lebanon? You ended up moving to Canada. They do speak French in Canada, just like in Lebanon. But what's that experience been like, and how long ago was it?
Well, I left Lebanon in 1984, which was about 10 years into the Civil War. And I chose Canada because it just seemed like a good country to live in. And Lebanon didn't seem like it was going to be getting any better anytime soon. So, as you said, people speak French in Canada. Not everybody, but a good percentage of the population. So, seemed like a good place to come. It's a great country, so I don't regret that.
Yes, and there's a lot of talk right now with your Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, with his India visit. Maybe we'll touch on that a little later. We'll probably touch a little on his relationship with the Middle East, which you write a lot about. I actually was, I don't know if I told you off the air, I was a Israeli army soldier for about 2.5 years.
Wow.
Served in the 2000s from 2005 to 2008. Was not I didn't really like the experience, but I was I'm still thankful that I had the chance to help protect my aunts and uncles over there, and my cousins. I have a cousin right now who's a police officer there. Um, I'm obviously, there's a couple things I don't agree with the Israeli government on. I'm kind of a civil libertarian of the American style, an
Mhm.
economic libertarian too. Um, Tell me, you grew up in a country that was called the Paris of the Middle East for many years.
Yeah.
Um, what changed from the time that you were born to the time that you had to leave your home country? That in terms of changing it from this very well regarded part of that region to it was wrought by civil war between one Lebanese and another.
Yeah. Lebanon was doing well economically before the war, relatively, to the rest of the Arab countries, and considered to be a place to invest, a place to go on vacation, and so on. But obviously, the war created a lot of problems, and the economy still has not really recovered not only because it takes time to recover, but also because Hezbollah is a leftover from the civil war. They still have weapons. They are more powerful than the Lebanese army. So, and that is a huge problem for Lebanon, even though the government does not openly recognize it. But I'm sure that they realize that it is a big problem.
Yes, and from reading back, years ago about Lebanon, I remember that, as you say, Hezbollah is a holdover from the militia area and the war of there was the war of the camps, and there was a Michel Aoun, I think in the early 90s, was a Christian militia leader. There was what's the guy's name? Tony Frangia, the Jumail family, Jumlat. Those were all kind of warlords for different
Mhm.
groups and ethnic and religious groups, but more religious groups because Jumlat is a Druze gentleman. Jumails are, I think, they're also Maronite Christians. Um, why is it, do you think, that it's so difficult for the different religious groups to work in Lebanon? Do you think it could be a result of that structure that was implemented by the French in the 1940s of dividing the parliament by different religious groups?
I don't think that division that the Constitution enforces in Lebanon is a problem. I think it is a symptom of the problem. And the problem is that different religious groups have difficulty living together in peace in the Middle East. You can see that all over the Middle East. And I think that the Christians would be able to live with the Jews if they had if they were able to, if they didn't have other people in the way. But in general, a lot of other groups, mostly the Shiites and Sunnis, have a history of fighting each other. There is a long history of occupation in the Middle East, from the Turkish Empire to Britain and so on. So the Middle East has never acquired these values that we have in the West of diversity and respecting differences and so on. They need to get there, but they're nowhere close at the moment.
So when I hear, and I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment, even though, I wish, I've been trying to get pro-Palestine people to come in and talk to me, but haven't succeeded yet. Um, a lot of people suggest that prior to the 1948 Arab-Israeli wars, that there was, a symbiotic relationship, a very nice relationship between, Muslim, Christian, and also Jewish people in Arab countries such as Iraq and Egypt. And my family, half of my family, my mom's family came from Baghdad.
Mhm.
What's your experience with that? Was it truly as they portray it, or is that kind of revisionist history?
I mean, I don't have experience as a Jewish person in the Middle East because in Lebanon I was not Jewish and I didn't know any Jewish people. But I know from reading history books that the Jews were tolerated in the Middle East. They weren't considered to be equal. Uh, so, so yeah, they were allowed to be there in most cases, but they weren't exactly equal citizens. So I think that that was obviously a problem. So when the Jewish people decided that they want to have their own state, and that state had to be on the land that had been theirs for 3,000 years, that was a problem for a lot of Arabs who could not accept the concept of Jewish people being independent right in the Middle East.
Yes, and there's personal anecdote I've heard from people that knew my grandpa that when he was forced to leave Iraq, he really did love being Iraqi. Apparently, he loved the music, he loved the reading. There was a big literary scene back there in the 1950s when he left. He was an Arab speaker and cultural uh, organism, if you want to call it, in every sense of the word. Other than that, I don't know much about him. He went to Israel with his family. He lived in poverty for the rest of his life, whereas in Iraq he did have pretty good income from I think it was a textile business. They told me. I probably should do a little more research on it, but tell me this issue. Excuse me. I have a cough, so please excuse me. Um, this issue with Palestine, the Palestinian people. I believe in 1970, a lot of them were evicted by the King of Jordan, and due to certain problems that were happening there, related to them living there, called Black September. And a lot of them came and they migrated to Lebanon, where others already lived. How did that affect living in Lebanon? Did you live in an area that was deeply affected by that migration?
No, I mean, I wasn't really aware of it at the time. So, no, I wasn't, as far as I know, I wasn't personally affected. And I was too young at the time anyway. I was, what year was that exactly?
I believe it was 1970.
Yeah, so I mean, it's 1970, I was 9 years old. So
Mhm.
I would have been pretty young at the time.
And growing up, did your school have a lot of discussion, or or were they talking a lot? a lot about the conflict with the Israelis? Was it like a daily?
No, no, I don't recall this being ever discussed in school. Um, we went to I went to a French-speaking Christian school. Most of the teachers were from France, and so we talked more about French history than about Lebanese history. And I can't recall, Lebanese current politics being discussed a lot in school.
So you kind of lived. I understand that this was common in some parts
Mhm.
of the Middle East, that there were, there were schools. I think there still is. By the way, I lived in Haifa. There was a Catholic Latin school
Okay.
still in the city there. Very interesting. I didn't go to school there, so I don't know how the education is over there. What would you say? I think you talked about a little about your religious issues. Why would you say that you decided to leave Catholicism? Was it a decision, or was it kind of something that happened naturally?
It happened naturally. I mean, I was never a religious person. Even when I was a teenager, I was going to Christian school, as I said, and every Friday we had the mass at the end of the day. I always left before the mass started. Uh, Most of the time, anyway, I probably attended a few masses. We had religion classes, which were mandatory, so I had to attend those. But I was never religious. Religion is a personal thing, in my opinion, and so some people feel it and some people don't.
That's the most Catholic thing I've ever heard, because I live here in Ohio, and most of my friends, believe it or not, they're Catholic. They're either Catholic or they used to be Catholic, and it's kind of strange to me. A lot of them are from Ireland, or not they aren't from Ireland, but they're Irish Catholic, Polish. We do have a lot of Lebanese and Palestinian immigrants here in Northeast Ohio. By the way, I think we have the second largest Arab American population in my city. Um, so you've lived in Canada since '84. Do you consider yourself still an Arab, a Lebanese, or would you say you're more of a Canadian now?
Well, in many ways, I'm more Canadian, but I still, I mean, my accent is still, you can tell I'm not from Canada. Um, I still like Lebanese cuisine, Lebanese music, and so on. So, you can't totally leave your roots, and some of my heritage, I think, is very worth preserving.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to school. We had a very, very vibrant Lebanese club over there. Very and by the way, they never treated me wrong. I always had good friends over there. They had clubs, they had dances, they had trips. Um, you know, they had food festival. Um, Trying to think of other things that were, and by the way, Egyptians too. I'd probably say Egyptians are a little more fun, but that's a personal opinion. Uh, but in any case, let's turn a little to some of your writings. So, can I feature one of your articles from January 8th, and we'll discuss it a bit,
Sure.
called "Why Trump is Winning Support on the Zionist Left." And I was a little, I was taken aback by it. First of all, I didn't know anything about you at the time, and here's Fred's picture. But you were talking a lot about the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel being considered dangerous by Western politicians. He refuses to give Palestinians a free pass. Talking about Donald Trump, of course.
Hmm.
However, and also that he stood up to Iran. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but
Yeah.
my question would be, so first question, what do you consider the Zionist left?
Well, I just mean people who are Zionist and also happen to be on the left politically. So the left means people who support unions, who support the women's movements, who support more equality with regard to income, having more fairness with regard to income, progressive taxation, those kind of things. So, I
So
mean,
would
there are Zionists who believe in these things and Zionists who don't. So, yeah, like in any other group.
that's interesting because you also write about a lot of the anti-Zionist left in some of your other pieces, uh,
Right.
and um, and I know that in America we're having issues. And I by the way, I don't know what Zionism is sometimes, and that's coming from somebody who lived there and whose entire family. I kind of consider myself, the things I believe in are free market, capitalism, civil liberties, and then religiously, I believe in Judaism, and Zionism. I think is kind of a political philosophy that I've never totally understood. But how do you define it personally?
Sorry, how do I define what?
How would you define the philosophy of Zionism? Is it, um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Uh, to me, Zionism is simply believing that Jews have the right to their own independent state on the land of Israel.
Yeah, that's the most simple explanation that I can find, and I think a lot of people agree on it. I've been called, believe it or not, and maybe you have the same experience. I discuss things with people who are all over the political spectrum, and they will call you a Zionist for all sorts of reasons that may not have to do with what you mentioned, and
Right.
it's really it confuses the issue, I believe. Um,
Yeah.
why
Well,
is it you?
in the Arab
Yeah.
world, Zionist is an insult, so I can understand what you mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
and in the world of the internet now, the the free internet, which I still defend because I'm a free speech defender, it also is an insult because they believe it's the people who want to control free speech. I simply, I think your definition, the one that you told, is really, if you really look at the definition of what it means, it does mean that it is the desire to provide a homeland for the Jewish people. We have, let me see, I think we had a couple comments before we continue. Um, Mr. Bandsaw Bandit from Australia asks, in your opinion, is moving the U.S. Embassy a good or bad thing, and why? He's referring obviously to the U.S. Embassy in
Mhm.
Israel.
Well, I think that it's a very good thing. I think all countries should have their embassies in the capital of the host country. And that's the case everywhere else. Israel is one exception where nobody until now wanted to recognize what Israel says is its own capital. So, I mean, it's basic respect towards Israel to accept what Israel says is its capital. So there is no reason why all countries shouldn't be moving their embassies there.
Right, and I think that it's also possible. It's possible for the Americans to put their embassy, for example, in Western Jerusalem, which isn't even, it's not even debated as part of the negotiations in any case. So I think it's,
Exactly.
in my opinion, I personally don't care, and it might sound kind of stupid, but to me, it's a symbolic issue. I
Yeah.
think Trump is, he knows how to use these issues of symbolism in order to piss off the right people. That's basically the way I see a lot of his strategy, and not just the Middle East, by the way. Um, so let's backtrack a little bit. Why is it that you, who are, you were born in Lebanon, what attracted you to the idea of defending the Jewish state, which I see you do it very frequently on the blogs, on the Times of Israel, for example. What kind of, I mean, go back to the reason that you started getting an
Mhm.
interest in this.
Uh, I mean, the basic reason is that I think that the Arab world should be at peace with Israel because it's good for everybody. So, starting from that point of view, I became interested in Israel, and the more I learned about it, the more I liked what I was learning. So that's basically how it happens. And I don't support at all the Arab position that they can't make peace with Israel. And that seems to be changing to some extent. So hopefully it will continue to change.
So have you visited the? I mean, you visited the region, but have you visited specifically Israel or the West
Not
Bank?
yet, but I will be visiting later this year.
Oh, okay, so yeah, I
Uh,
hope you get to visit Haifa, which is where I lived. Um, so talking a little about the opposing viewpoint. Okay, so when you speak, I don't know if you do, but if you speak to people who are Arabs of from Egypt or Palestine or Syria that are they do believe in this that Israel is an illegitimate state. What's their reaction if you reveal your views? Do they kind of look at you as a turncoat, or is there more openness today than in the past?
well, it's hard to compare with the past because I didn't really talk about this issue 20 years ago. But I get a variety of reactions. I usually avoid discussing that topic because there's really no point. People generally have their mind made up. And so I rarely discuss this in person with a lot of people. So I can't really compare and give you a big range of reactions. But there are a range of reactions.
So my experience has been, we have a lot of Palestinians here. I was working as an intern somewhere, and it happened to
Mm.
be that in my cubicle it was me, and there was a Muslim Indian, and there was another Muslim Indian, and then there was a Muslim Palestinian, and I got along great with actually all three of them. I'm still in touch with two of them, and the third one somewhat, but. Um, I think generally people are capable of being, professional and decent to one another. Um, However, there is an issue of violence within the Palestinian society, violence between Palestinians and other societies, including Israel, but also including other countries. Um, what do you think? I'm not looking at you as let's say an expert, but what's the solution to helping alleviate the issue of those people, especially the refugees that or they're called refugees, but it's under dispute. But the people who their families left Palestine after 1948.
Uh, I think it's pretty obvious that they should settle where they are. I mean, there are Palestinians who have been living in Lebanon for 70 years. You know, this is essentially their country. They don't have the same rights as Lebanese people, but they don't know any other country. The idea that they will one day come back to Israel, which they have never seen, to homes that no longer exist, is ridiculous. They should be when refugees go to Europe or go to Canada. Can you imagine if after 70 years we told them you have to go back home? When you go somewhere as a refugee, if it's very, if you may want to go back home after a couple of years, but if you've been there for decades, it is your new home. So the Palestinians who live in Lebanon should become Lebanese. The Palestinians who live in Syria should become Syrian, and so on.
Do you think that there is resistance among the people of Lebanon or some of these other states like Egypt to accepting these people as full citizens, or is it more the government that resists doing that?
I think it's a combination. I mean, there is some, you know, bigotry within Lebanese society towards Palestinians. That's for sure. That's one thing I have seen personally, and I'm sure it exists in other countries too. Um, but you know, if they became integrated, they had the same rights and so on as everybody else. They are not that different.
I have a question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer the question, but if not, I can just give my opinion from one of the viewers. What do you think of Jared Kushner's security downgrading, and how do you think it will affect future diplomatic efforts? Do you want to talk about that, or?
Yeah, sorry,
Uh,
I'm not familiar with that.
so what he's referring to is the son-in-law of Donald Trump
Right.
is one of his main. Uh, I guess I would call him a stooge, and he sends him to the Middle East and whatever. And in my opinion, I think it's time to tell Jared Kushner not to be involved. It's maybe he's a smart guy. I don't know. I think he's kind of an embarrassment, personally. And I think that you do need somebody who's a little less, um, linked to Donald Trump on a personal level. He's his son-in-law.
Hmm.
Uh, it's a lot of people have criticized him too much. I would say that Jared Kushner was never a good pick to work in the White House to begin with. Maybe Donald Trump's, if he had to pick any of his kids, I'd probably say his son Eric. Kristen is asking, competition with ABL Live. You promised me a video last Saturday. I'm waiting. She's referring to this video. By the way, I put that video out. By the way, I put out the video on Trofim Lysenko. It's in the links below. It's in the description. Fortunately, this was the only time me and Fred could get together. Um, Pinochet asked, has he witnessed any of the anti-Jew propaganda in Lebanon, such as in schools or TV shows or etc.? You talked about school, but what about TV and radio? What was that like?
Uh, I mean, I was uh, pretty young when the war started. And during the war, that's pretty much all we talked about. I don't remember there was much propaganda on TV about Jews. Honestly, I don't remember any of it. Maybe there wasn't any, or maybe it was just didn't happen often enough that I noticed. And also, it wasn't really an issue that I was that aware of at the time, so I may have seen it and not really registered.
Okay, so let's talk Canada for a little bit. Canada and the Middle East and just Canada itself.
Mhm.
So let's talk first about the issue of the BDS movement, which is very strong in Canada. I don't know about your part of Canada, which we won't discuss, but it's very strong, I believe, in Montreal. I think Vancouver as well. Um, would you believe that it's a movement that's contrary to the spirit of some of these new laws that are being passed in Canada that prohibits hate speech or similar issues?
Yeah, I think it's probably, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if it's against any laws, but it's certainly against any decency, in my opinion. If we want to start boycotting countries based on their human rights records, there are a lot of countries that should be boycotted before Israel. So once people have boycotted all these other countries, and once things have improved in those countries, when they get to Israel, then we can talk about it. But in my opinion, it's ridiculous to be boycotting Israel when people are never talk about boycotting China, Syria. I'm sure you're aware of all the countries that should be boycotted before Israel. So,
Well, here's my opinion on the BDS movement. Okay, and that was the sub. I'm sorry that I didn't give you a chance to view the video because I had car trouble earlier, so I just got home in time to shoot it. But I was discussing the issue of a lot of these movements that are, they are anti-Jewish in the United States, including some of the BDS movement, but also, Louis Farrakhan, if you know who that is, and
mhm.
a number of white supremacist movements that are bona fide white supremacist movements. And I was saying that, the issue of the boycotts, I think, is not. I don't have a problem with them boycotting a product or a business that they don't like or a country even. But in my opinion, that's fine. That's protected under freedom of speech. But my opinion is that when you go and intimidate people, and I've seen videos of them intimidating shops and coming and vandalizing stuff and intimidating speakers and attacking stores, etc. You get the idea.
Yeah.
I think that violates freedom of speech,
Oh,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
and Canada is very weak at defending the freedom of speech of certain individuals that I'm a huge fan of, like God Sad, if you're familiar with who that is, who
No.
is it, who is Lebanese, by the way.
Okay.
and then Jordan Peterson. So what do you think is is the current right now? Where is the BDS movement headed in Canada? Are they getting stronger, or is have they like kind of reached their limit?
I haven't particularly analyzed the BDS movement in Canada, so I can't really answer that question. It seems to me it is gaining some steam internationally, but I think it's still very far from being a real threat. They mostly embarrass themselves, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I dislike about boycotts personally, boycotts of this style, is that they don't leave it up to the audience to decide whether they want to buy it. Roger Waters, are you? Do you know who Roger Waters is?
Yeah, yeah,
The Pink Floyd bassist, former Pink
yes.
Floyd bassist. I think that if he went on stage, and by the way, I'm not a fan of his solo music either. I think he's, let's just say I'm a fan of the of David Gilmour, the other guy from Pink Floyd. But that's neither here nor there. But if he goes on stage and he says, "Look, I don't, I don't, I don't appear in Israel. I don't hire Israelis. I won't buy anything from Israel. I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's against my conscience." I have no problems with that. What he does that really annoys me is he will go to an artist like John Lydon, the former Sex Pistols lead singer, and say, "Hey, you are garbage for appearing there in Israel. You should join this boycott, and if you don't, we're going to call you out." And then I'm not surprised when other artists say, "Look, I can appear wherever I want. I'm not supporting any governments or not supporting any governments. I'm just there to perform for my audience and people that like my music, and that's it." And that what do you think though? Recently, and if you didn't hear about this, that's fine. Some county in Florida, they decided that they're going to try to ban Roger Waters from appearing there. There was another place, I think it was in Long Island. They wanted
Hmm.
to ban him from appearing there. What's your stance
Yes.
on that?
I mean, I wouldn't normally support banning an artist, but considering that this is what he does to other people, I think it's fair in this case.
Yeah,
If
I
you,
can't agree. I can't agree with that as much as, and believe me, I despise Roger Waters' music.
Mhm.
Not his music with Pink Floyd again, but I just don't like him. Not politically, not on a personal level, not on a musical level. But for me, the thing with this country, America, which distinguishes us from other countries, is that we allow people
Mhm.
to do things that we don't like, and so long as they don't hurt other people.
Yeah.
I don't think that by him appearing at a concert he hurts other people. I think by him harassing other artists he hurts
Mhm.
people. So that's I think you do have to separate the two.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your point of view. I don't agree with it. I think it's fair when somebody is, in our opinion, breaking moral standards and that we don't want this person to benefit from our community, that we would tell them they're not welcome.
Yeah, and I think that's the rationale behind the effort by these groups in Long Island and in Florida to get him banned, because they're kind of in high Jewish what's it called, population areas. I think one of them is in Tampa or something. I'm not from Florida, but for me, I think that the Constitution does stand above it. I think we're going to have to agree to disagree there. How about though, the issue of detention of this Ahed Tamimi
Hmm.
woman, girl, whatever you want to call her. She is a girl and a woman. Um, what do you think was the proper course of action there for the Israeli police? Do you think she should have been arrested, or do you think that the action of doing that was a detriment to the Israeli um, standing on the international stage?
Hmm. Well, I am not a lawyer, I am not an expert in the Israeli legal system or any other legal system. However, I respect Israel as a democracy, as a country that has a strong legal system. And if they feel that she should be in jail, then I have no problem with that.
Right, and you know, there's a lot of issues. I worked as a soldier. I was on checkpoints over there. The the scenes that are in those videos with her are very they don't just happen in her village. They happen all over the country. And while, you know, I don't like to see civilians getting arrested or beat, when I analyze those videos, I see adults pushing children towards the soldiers, provoking soldiers and police officers too. So, uh, you know, in my time, our role was not generally as soldiers to arrest civilians. That was up to the police officers, obviously, just like in most countries around the world. If necessary, you did have to arrest a civilian, obviously, and that did happen. Um, so when I would analyze these videos, Fred, and this isn't a question, it's just a kind of a reflection. I think it's incredibly just irresponsible of the parents and the family of this lady to use her and or you know it's irresponsible of her as well to go up to this armed man, a law enforcement officer or a military, a member of the military, and try to provoke an act of violence by attacking them. And that's why, you know, to a certain extent, it's futile to talk to these Palestine activists because they view it as justified in and of itself because they are an occupied power. And I have to, I try to explain to them it doesn't get through that. You know, when you assault somebody and they arrest you, you know, it's still, you know, that's part of the legal system's interaction with the civilian community. It's unfortunate that this I don't know how old she is. She's like 17 or whatever. She has to be in jail, but she did everything she possibly could without, you know,
Mhm.
committing an actual terror attack to get it done. Is that big news over there in Canada, Mrs. or Miss Tamimi's
Uh,
situation?
I saw one report in the news in the newspaper about it, but I wouldn't say it's big news. I haven't heard anybody talking about it.
Yeah, because here, at least people who are interested in the region, a lot of people, a lot of people do talk about it, and
Mhm.
it's kind of bizarre for me because in several videos I see her, and you know I see not only her but her brother or her cousin who's even smaller than her from 2012. The adults will just push them towards the soldiers. I actually did an analysis video on it. I can send you one day if you want to see it.
Sure.
Um, we have Hamilton, he said he agrees with you. He says, I agree with the speaker. Ostracism is the most natural way to discourage poor behavior. That's what he's talking when you're talking about waters. Bansal Bannett said, Canada is restricting free speech and the rights of majority of their citizens in the interest of a few. The same here in Australia. Hamilton also says Britain just arrested two people leading a conservative group for speaking out against Muslim rape gangs in the city. Um, what are you able to speak a bit about the influence of Islam in Canadian society right now?
Uh, Not really. I mean, I'm not an expert in Islam or any religion.
Okay,
But I know that in Canada there are issues related to that. In Quebec, there was a law passed with regard to covering your face in certain situations or not covering it. I know that there are a lot of people who speak up against what they see as danger coming from Islam and Muslim immigrants. I don't get involved too much in these discussions. However, I have written one or two articles with regard to face coverings. In my opinion, we shouldn't be allowing face coverings in public because that's a safety issue.
yes, and you have also the issue of Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, who went to India recently, and he's doing this, more of an open borders immigration policy. So far as in America, I don't know if it's as accurate in reality as what is portrayed. But could you give your opinion about Mr. Trudeau's policy as far as what's important to you? You could start with the Middle East. You could talk about anything else. What would you say is your opinion of his performance as prime minister since 2015?
Uh, One thing that I don't like is big deficits. Generally, I'm not too unhappy with his policies. His policies with regard to Israel have been fairly consistent with the policies of Stephen Harper, although he's a lot less vocal. And there were probably a couple of cases where Stephen Harper would act differently. For example, it's likely, it's hard to know for sure, but it's likely that Stephen Harper would have supported President Trump with regard to Jerusalem. Trudeau preferred to take a neutral position. But in general, his policies are fairly pro-Israel, fairly consistent with previous government and governments before that. So, I'm not too unhappy with that regard. I would prefer he was more outspoken, but that's okay. And in general, with regard to other policies, I mean, he's kind of middle of the road. I'm okay with that.
Do you think a lot of the other people I interact with kind of look at him as kind of a joke? And one of the reasons was because of this India visit. He met with, whether it's his doing or not, he met with a convicted uh, Sikh extremist, terrorist, or attempted murderer. He did make a fool out of himself. In my opinion, he made a fool out of himself with the whole outfit thing. Um, you know, I thought it was pretty funny though. um, the thing is, in America, we elected a person, Mr. Trump, who doesn't care what other people think, and he's all about I'm gonna do what I want and use my own strategy. Um, what would you think? And you don't, if you don't think that there's an answer, you don't have to answer it. But what's the philosophy behind the Trudeau leadership? What's his whole? Because you see him get on stage and he's just trying to be a nice guy. I'm like, what's this about?
I'm far from an expert in his philosophy, but I mean, from what I can see, he's basically going for being popular, being liked, having good relations with everyone, which is fine. I mean, it's an approach to politics. Trump has a very different approach. I didn't support either of them. In the obviously I don't vote the United States, but he wasn't he wouldn't have been my choice. And Trudeau was not my choice because I thought that Stephen Harper was doing a good job as prime minister. Um, and But I mean, I think Trudeau is doing okay.
So
Everybody
so
has their
you
quirks.
you do have this politics going on in Canada right now with the conservative alliance, I think they're called, right? Or Conservative Party. Um, do you think that they present a good alternative vision for Canada as far as the economy? I don't know what business you work in, but you know, Canada they're very dependent right now. I think that they have a good auto industry, but that's largely
Mhm.
due to NAFTA. Um, a lot of their business is concentrated in the Ontario, Quebec area. The prairie regions it's kind of dependent on the oil industry. I don't know what they do in Saskatchewan.
Mhm.
I have no clue what happens there. What do you think about
Right.
that?
Well, you know what? The policies of the liberals and the policies of the conservatives are not that different in most cases. And if the NDP was to ever come to power, their policies would not be that different either. In fact, you can see in Alberta, where the NDP came to power for the first time ever, it was a conservative government for a very, very long time. And you can see that the NDP government there is defending the oil industry, trying to drum up business in that industry and so on. So, I mean, when a government comes to power, they have to look at policies from a different point of view than when they're in opposition and they're just trying to please their political base.
Yes, and the thing with the NDP, who, for those of you from outside of Canada, I know we have people in Australia watching, and I think Pinochet is from England. We have a user called Augusto Pinochet, like the dictator. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but that's what
Yeah.
he calls himself. And we let him call himself whatever he wants. But um, for those of you that don't know, the NDP is the New Democratic Party over in Canada. They're further to the left than the Liberals. They have a new Sikh leader. I heard him speak. He sounds like a very intelligent guy. And
Mhm.
I'm actually a pretty far, I'm not far right, but I'm a right wing economic guy, very pro market against the welfare state. What do you think about this guy?
Uh, with regard to Israel, which is one thing that I always measure politicians, is he hasn't done that well. He took a position against the position of President Trump with regard to Jerusalem, whereas the liberals took a neutral position and the conservatives took a stand in support. So I wasn't happy with that position. In general, he hasn't really said a whole lot about Israel. I know that he stopped a couple of strongly anti-Israel resolutions from coming to the floor at the recent convention that the NDP had. So that was good. But I don't think he would be a strong leader with regard to Israel. With regard to other issues, I suspect that he wouldn't be that different from Justin Trudeau.
So I'm noticing, correct me if I'm wrong. Are you Would you say that the Israel issue kind of is the core of how you support a politician or not?
It's a huge uh, priority for me. Obviously, it's not the only one. I mean, if somebody was a serial killer, I wouldn't be voting for them just because they said they support Israel. But if a politician is fairly reasonable otherwise, and they're running against another politician who is against Israel, I will vote for the politician who is for Israel if that person is otherwise reasonable.
You see, there's where I think we do have a bit of a difference because, I'm somebody who my belief is, every state's sovereignty is, that's what keeps every state respecting one another. And, a lot of these politicians in the United States, for example, we have the Democratic Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer. I don't know if you know who he is, but,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I
So
heard he spoke at the APAC summit
sure.
conference. Yeah,
And in my opinion, the guy is such a weasel and so dishonest that it would probably be better if he did not associate with with Israel, in my opinion, because it actually degrades it lends less credit to the issue. And the problem I see, there are, for example, politicians, Ron Paul, who is not a very big fan of the aid packages. I'm not a fan of foreign aid to any country. Excuse me, but I think it doesn't work. It doesn't matter what country it is, from the United States. I think it should be stopped. Ron Paul, I think he changed my philosophy a lot because he said, we'll respect other countries, including Israel's right to determine their own foreign policy, so long as they respect our right to determine our foreign policy, and that way, if there's less intervention around the world, there will probably be less wars. Um, what's your opinion on that? Because the issue of foreign aid to Israel is huge. You are a huge pro-Israel supporter. I'm more of a libertarian. I do
Mhm.
support Israel, but in a different way. What do you think about that issue of foreign aid?
Well, there are several reasons why it's very important for a country like Canada, and especially a country like the United States, to be supporting Israel. In the case of the United States, there is the fact that they have a veto in the United Nations Security Council, so they can stop resolutions that would cause a lot of damage to Israel. And the other reason is that historically Israel has needed help from other countries militarily to supply them with weapons in order to defend themselves. During the War of Independence, they received weapons secretly from Czechoslovakia, and without that, they would not have won that war. After that, they were receiving weapons secretly from France for a long time, for many years, and without that, they would not have won the wars that they won. And then after that, they have been receiving weapons from the United States. They do have their own industry as well, but it certainly did not exist during the War of Independence. I don't think it's still large enough to be self-sufficient. I'm not an expert in that area, but I know that they buy they buy planes for the United States and so on. The U.S. promised to ensure that Israel maintains a military superiorities with the countries that would want to destroy them, to me is extremely important. So if a president comes along that says, I don't care about that policy, I will not help Israel maintain military superiority, and I will not support Israel in the United Nations Security Council, that will force Israel to refuse to abide by UN security resolutions that are against them, and it will force them to find other ways to get the weapons that they need. Mm-hmm. Until the Middle East becomes a peaceful place where Israel is not threatened, they need that. So they need the support of a country like the United States. They don't need Canada nearly as much, but considering the few friends that Israel has in the world, when there is a friendly government like Justin Trudeau to some extent, but mostly Stephen Harper when he was in power, it is nice, I think, for Israel to hear somebody speak the way Stephen Harper did.
Yes, we have somebody in the audience, Hamilton, who's he's putting forth a lot of common criticisms, about Zionists, U.S.'s liberty, foreign aid through AIPAC at taxpayers' expense, unchecked nuclear weapons, regime change. I think some of those are kind of common ones. Not all of them I agree with. U.S.'s liberty I've talked a little about on other videos, but here let me present an alternative vision, and I'll have you react, and we'll see if Hamilton reacts in the chat. My vision is this, okay? Having served there and having been, just a soldier at the very lowest level, the aid is used both against the Israelis and against the Palestinians by the State Department of the United States in order to coerce both of them into a peace process that I don't believe they're actually interested in anymore. And it actually sustains an enterprise, the peace process that has caused the death of many Palestinians and many Israelis. And if this aid were to be put on a different basis, where simply Israel would buy the weapons straight up instead of using the foreign aid model that the U.S. does use, where they allocate money and then they give it to the Israelis and then they pump it into the weapons contractors. I believe they should simply sell the weapons that the Israelis want to the Israelis. Where those weapons are not available, for example, for budgetary reasons, I think the Israelis should just try to develop them themselves. As for the Palestinians, I think that their dependency on foreign aid it's pretty well established, given the recent issues with UNRWA, which is the UN Relief Works Agency. They're very, very dependent on it. I think that's a real problem for them. They don't get to develop their own institutions and their own hospitals and their own civil society. I think if you revoke the foreign aid, if you ended the peace process charade that's right now, it's possible that these two sides could have a different momentum to the negotiations. Also, it's possible that just a regular old war could break out. But the peace process as it is, I think, is I see it kind of as an infringement on the rights of both people by the international community. It's not just the United States that's involved. When we were there, there was the UN, hundreds of cars all the time, SUVs just driving around like they were, in a rap video or something, all the time. European Union, Russia also, I think, is involved, although probably less right now. Um, who else? The United States, obviously. I think that this endless intervention in the region, but by the way, also in Syria, there's Russia, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the United States. Who am I forgetting? It's not going to cause more. It's not going to cause peace. It can only lead to more war. And if you withdraw all those foreign entities out of the region, then Syria would they would have to settle the issue themselves for better or worse. What do you guys think, you, Fred, and Hamilton in the chat about my alternative ideas?
I know that there are people who present those kind of ideas. I haven't looked at it closely as to what would be the effect of stopping, money from the United States to a number of places. It's possible that it would be better. I don't know.
Okay, so I think with that we've gone for about an hour, but Fred, please check him out. I have one of his um, articles in the description talking, but he has a lot of articles for the Times of Israel. Is there anywhere else where you write? By the way, I could just put it in the chat.
Oh yes, a number of places. I've written for New Canadian Media several articles. I've written for Gatestone Institute.
Oh, I know them. I
Uh,
love Gatestone Institute.
yeah, they're very good. Alan Dershowitz, who's one of my favorite writers, writes for them. Also, I've written for Jerusalem Post a while back. Probably other places that I can't remember. I've written some articles in French too, even.
I think I saw you publish an article in Polish or something. But did you speak Polish or was it
Well,
translated?
no, that was translated by someone.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been translated to like probably about a dozen languages.
The whole Poland thing with the Holocaust.
Hmm.
It's become, in my opinion, um, I just have such mixed feelings about it. Do you have any feeling either way about it?
Uh, well, I mean, I think a ban on people speaking about something is ridiculous to start with.
Mhm.
But but by introducing a law that says you don't have the right to question the version of Polish history that the government presents, it is almost saying that they feel guilty about something. It's like the Turkish government that pretends that there wasn't a genocide of Armenians.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think there's another area where we sort of. I mean, I don't know if this is a disagreement on that because I do disagree with the law. But my feeling as regards to the Holocaust is that, my dad's family went through it in Ukraine, which is right next door to Poland, and people who are really reacting to this with what happened in Poland. I personally would never want, no disrespect to Polish people or Jews or whatever, I would never want to go to Poland ever. Not for that, not for anything. Israel, sure. Brazil, probably, absolutely. I would never want to go to Poland or Ukraine. They just seem like the worst countries in the world. And I have friends from Ukraine; they're great people, but I don't want anything to do with it. They can pass a law to keep me out of there. I'll comply with it any day. I'll drink vodka with them here, but I'm not going there, and I have no interest in what they in what they're doing over there. What about you? Would you go back visit Lebanon, or is that kind of off the table right now?
I would not be able to visit right now, but if Lebanon ever made peace with Israel, then that would be a possibility.
Okay, that's interesting. And this again, this was Fred Maroun. You can find him at the links that I put in the chat, or at the link that I put on the description. And hopefully we'll have other Lebanese people. Hopefully Haifa Wehebe, if you know who that is. She's a singer from Lebanon. When we were in the army, we used to hear her all the time and see her posters. It was
Mhm.
probably one of the most beautiful women in the Middle East. So I don't know if you know who that is. Let me,
Uh,
you know what? I'll put it
Yeah,
up
I'm
for
not
the
sure
viewers.
what you said. You may not have pronounced it quite right, so I'm not
Haifa
exactly sure.
Wahhabi.
I'm
Let
not
me
sure I
see.
understood how you pronounced it.
Maybe you'll recognize her. Um, hold on. Let me see here. I can share the screen.
Okay.
So yeah, that's her.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, she's obviously a young artist. I'm not familiar with the young artists.
Oh, she's the biggest Arabic singer
Yeah.
in the Middle East. There was a
Okay.
Arabic music station that if you had the right cable package, you could get called
Hmm.
Rutana, and her
Okay.
video was on all the time. And
Okay. I'll have to check it out then.
anyway, so thanks again for Fred. I hope you want to come back someday. If we have some a new issue with anything that we discussed today or anything that you want to discuss. And I hope you enjoyed your time here. And this is Bold Like a Leopard again, and we're signing off. Please share, like, and comment below.
Thank you.